Colin Dannenberger asked me to do the Claret and Gray from Helen Shaw's Flies for Fish and Fishermen. So, Colin, here it is. I've done a couple versions. The first one is the wool body, and the second version is the quill body. The head on this first one is just about perfect, and this is something you should aspire to every time out. I know it's what I aspire to. I'll talk more about how to get that head later in the video. This will be the last of these wet flies in this style that I do for a while. I need to get on to some different things. Fly tying's not just wet flies, and I'm really a dry fly guy, actually. So anyway, there'll be a number of things coming up in the future that I hope you find interesting. This hook is a number 6 Mustad 3399. I decided to go fairly big with it because the fly has goose wings, and goose is sizable. If it was duck quill, mallard quill, I could easily go smaller. This works best on larger size flies, maybe 6, 8, and 10. All the flies in Helen Shaw's book were, the display flies in there were tied on number 10s. And then the tying step-by-step pictures were done on number 6s. So this is right in line with Helen Shaw's book. I've just tied in 2 strands of Berlin wool. I'm going to just wrap them as is, not make a dubbing out of them. Helen Shaw did a lot of this sort of thing, and it's a nice effect because it looks segmented. Don't try to do a single strand, at least with Berlin wool, it won't work. What'll happen is the single strand isn't strong enough and it'll kind of tear. You could twist this up into a rope and get even more segmentation. That's not a bad thing. Lots of options. Tying off underneath the hook and trapping twice. When I say trapping, I mean wrapping once behind and once in front of the, in this case, the wool. You can trap anything. This is whiting American hen hackle. Some stuff I dyed a while back, and it's a pretty good shade of red claret, all things considered, and I don't remember how I got it. So let that be a lesson. I dyed up a baggie of some schlappen and some of this stuff, and unfortunately, this is the last of the whiting I have, and it's really nice for this fly. So, and I wish I had more, but of course I don't, and I have no idea how I dyed it. So if you're dyeing, keep track of what you're doing. I'm sure I can reconstruct it. My next batch of claret. But anyway, I just don't keep good notes, and I always think I've dyed up enough to last me, and it never does. A few strays I'll get with tweezers. You can pull it down into a beard, or you can just pull it down and hope it stays down when you mount the wing. And that's more or less what I've done here. I've got a couple turns right at the very front, but that's about it. Because the thread is black, I really don't want it showing. If I go too far back on this, the black will show after the fact. I'm plucking some fibers off the top, as you can see. The cleaner we can get the top, the better for mounting any kind of wings. Now these goose wings or goose slips are very stiff, so you probably don't have to pull this down into a beard if you don't want to. I went ahead and did it anyway. And right now I'm cutting a slip from a right feather, which will form the near wing. It's just like duck quills. Goose quills and duck quills are the same. The left, right, there's a left feather right there, will form the far wing. That's assuming a tips together wing, and I typically do that. You can do it other ways. You can do wings 4 different ways, and one of these days I'll talk about all 4. But I've always done tips together, tips up, tips to the rear wings. There's no particular reason for that. They're just the way I remember flies being when I was a kid. I take a lot of time getting the wings situated just the way I want it. In this case, I wanted a low wing. And in order to get that, I straddled the shank quite a bit, as you can see there. And that mounting went fairly well. By all means, play with it a lot. I know I do. Now, the secret to getting this good head is have no more than 4 turns around the butts. To clarify, I mean when binding the butts down, no more than 4 turns. Now, these turns are going back up, and you can do a dozen turns or so going back up, but you only want this head to be 4 turns wide. So when you first bind down the head, before you cut off the butts, only do 4 turns. In fact, you can get away sometimes with just doing 3. And then, let me trim this little piece here. Only take a second. If things go your way, and you can do then a 6-turn whip finish to finish the fly, and the head will be short and stubby and pan out beautifully. So short is what you want to get a good looking head on a wet fly. It's different than streamers. Streamers have elongated heads, but not wet flies. And that's right there is what I want in a head. If you want an even smaller head on your wets, you can tie the hackle in front of the wing, and you can get a tiny, almost infinitesimally small, almost invisible head. This fly is the Claret quill from the same book, And I've done a little bit of a variation on it. Rather than use stripped dyed ostrich quill, I've used stripped dyed emu quill here as a rib. I really like the effect, and it's a variation on the fly, but it works. I'll start this from where I've wrapped a floss body and tied in the quill. I'm going to start by adding just a drop of fly tight cement at the very tip of the floss and letting it soak in at the back of the fly. In this instance, that technique seemed to work like a charm. I've tried it in the past and it hasn't worked for me, but it did there. This fly stays together nicely. I think the rib probably helps a little bit, but in the past, I think I've used Griff's Thin for that because it penetrates so well, and maybe Fly Tight's better. It's a little more gluey, that's for sure. All right, here I've wound the quill body. Get ready to tie in some hackle here. This hackle is not my preferred hackle, but it's all I had left. This is some stiffer schlappen. It's harder to work with than the whiting American hen. This is almost cock hackle, really. And it's not as dense. It's just not as nice all the way around, but it'll work. It's going to be sparse. We've got that going for us. I'm going to have another claret dyeing session one of these days. I'll try to film it and show it to you. You can see this is a lot tougher to stroke back, this hackle. We'll get it. Sometimes you just have to stop whining. If there's one thing that typifies my style of tying, it's never ever giving up. I think becoming a good fly tyer is a question of just that. Just never taking no for an answer. And that's my philosophical nugget for the day. All right, going to bind this down with quickly about 4 turns, at least, minimum. I'm going to trap this stem. It just separates it out a little bit more and cut it. No strays. I'm using the middle finger of my left hand to mount this, to hold it. Really take your time getting everything situated exactly the way you want it. I'm using quite a bit of pressure with my left hand pinch, trying to keep the wing from buckling. And I twisted the thread up tight so that it'll be very strong, because I'm using a lot of pressure mounting this wing. I've got 2 turns on it and it's looking good. Twist the thread up again as if I'm screwing in a light bulb. is to make it super strong. I'm using a lot of pressure here. I'm guarding against thread torque with pressure from the index finger of my left hand, just the very tip of it. So I got my 4 turns, and now I'm winding back up, starting at the bottom. A lot of times it won't start going right up. You've got to do some turns at the bottom to get it started. That's okay. We'll do a whip finish. 6 is ideal. Looks like 7 going to be required here. Had some flotsam sticking out at the head. And we'll trim it and see how it looks. Not bad if I do say so myself, and I do. There's lots of variations of this in Helen Shaw's book, and you should try them all. I think maybe I've done them all. I'll link to an article I did previously on these flies down below. Have fun.